It started when you left your resume open on the shared drive, Melody. That's how it began. Not with the product roadmap, not with the client pitch, but with my manager, Ethan, hovering over my desk, his face a mask of feigned concern. He had that insincere warmth in his voice, the one he saved for when he was about to give a performance review. "Looking for new opportunities, Melody?" he asked, his tone laced with patronizing curiosity. I gave him the corporate smile I'd perfected over 8 years under the glare of blue light and constant microaggressions. "Oh, that's an old draft," I said smoothly, a lie I'd rehearsed just in case. "Just cleaning up my files?" He nodded, pretending to believe me, but we both knew the truth. That wasn't an old draft. I had just updated it 20 minutes earlier, during my lunch break, because a strange feeling of unease had settled in my gut. They had stopped including me in key strategy sessions, and my team's projects were suddenly being assigned secondary leads. The name of my key project, a 6-month rebuild of our entire user feedback algorithm, was slowly disappearing from the header of our presentation decks. So no, Ethan's discovery wasn't the beginning. The rot had started months ago. He was just the symptom that made the sickness undeniable. A week later, I was in one of the soundproof focus pods, a rare moment of peace, eating a sad protein bar in silence when I heard Sarah and David from 2 cubes over. Their voices were muffled but clear, echoing through the thin walls like a leaked memo. "She's good," Sarah said, "but just good enough." David chuckled. "Yeah, good enough Melody. That's what Veronica calls her." A moment of silence. Then their muffled voices disappeared. I just sat there, my protein bar forgotten in my hand, feeling like a pinned butterfly. I wondered how long they'd been saying it. How long Veronica, our VP of product, had been subtly tarnishing my reputation in meetings I wasn't even invited to. That night, I started researching employment law. I didn't find what I was looking for, but what I did find was something far more potent and, frankly, more lucrative. In the startup world, inside jokes are social currency, and good enough Melody had become one. It started showing up in Slack channel names, buried in presentation bullet points, and I even saw it scrawled on a Post-it note stuck to my laptop. Project for M. But I knew exactly where this train was heading. They weren't just mocking me. They were building a narrative to undermine my next performance review before it was even written. So I did what I do best. I outmaneuvered them. I stayed late, pulling system logs, compiling timestamps, and building a dossier of every single instance of the phrase, every pixel, and every condescending chuckle embedded into company property. Then I filed a trademark. What they didn't know yet was that they had already racked up a small fortune in usage fees, and I was going to make them pay for every single one. But the real fun, that started when Phil in finance opened the invoice and called me, choking on his cold brew. "Hi, Melody. This is Phil from accounting. We got a bill from you. Is this a joke?" "Oh, no," I said sweetly. "That's just the good enough beginning, Phil." He called back 5 minutes later, sounding like someone had just unplugged his calculator. "You're invoicing the company for an internal phrase?" "Yes," I said, stirring my tea with a pen. "Specifically, the unauthorized use of a federally registered trademark, retroactive to June." The silence was deafening, the kind where you can almost hear someone's brain stutter. I don't even know how to code that in our system," he stammered. "That's not my problem, Phil. That's above my pay grade. Or, I guess, it was." Click. That's when I knew they didn't take it seriously, yet. So I made them. The next morning, I blind carbon copied the invoice to legal, HR, and Veronica herself, with a little note attached. "Please forward to brand usage compliance. No threats, no angry emails, just polite, precise, and corporate enough to sound like a risk they couldn't afford to ignore." By noon, the panic was viral. Ethan showed up at my cube, his mouth twitching like a glitchy chatbot. "Hey, Melody, got a second for me?" "Always," I said. He closed the door to the small conference room like we were sealing ourselves in a spaceship. "Listen, everyone's rattled. What is this trademark thing? It's real? You're serious?" "I'm billing at the internal usage rate outlined in the licensing addendum I uploaded to the company's file server last night," I explained. "You can find it under legal IP. Good enough, Melody." Trademark. Melody, Jesus Christ. "This could be seen as sabotage," he said, his voice a low hiss. I leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Sabotage is gutting someone's promotion chances by weaponizing mediocrity. This is commerce." He stared at me like I had just grown a second head. "I'm not trying to hurt the company, Ethan," I added softly, just reclaiming my narrative. He didn't say another word, just got up and left the door hanging open behind him. Later that day, something strange happened. Brenda from HR came by with a green tea. We hadn't spoken since a misunderstanding about the whiteboard. She placed it gently on my desk like a peace offering. "Matcha latte," she said, a forced smile plastered on her face. "Your favorite, right?" "Used to be," I said, before I found out my performance was a punchline. "Oh, Melody, I think there's been a big misunderstanding," she said, her smile faltering. I responded. "Does legal misunderstand cease and desists?" Her smile froze like bad code. That night, when I logged in to finish prepping evidence for my second invoice, I saw it. Someone had tried to delete the shared Slack emoji of my face with the text "Good enough, Melody," but it was too late. I had already screen recorded its use by 5 directors, time-stamped and filed. That's when it clicked. They weren't afraid of the money. They were afraid of the paper trail. Someone, multiple someones, had turned me into a case study of how to invisibly destroy a career, slowly, politely, and legally. And I had just flipped the script. But I didn't know yet just how far they were willing to go to bury what I had uncovered. Not until the anonymous Slack DM showed up in my inbox, subject line, "You didn't hear this from me." At first, I thought it was a prank. The link sat there like a loaded gun with no fingerprints. No sender, no message, just the subject line. The kind of thing you ignore, unless you're me. Underpaid, underestimated, and already halfway down the rabbit hole. So, of course, I clicked. Inside was a single folder, no title. One file, Q3 Promotion Review, Internal Notes. PDF. I opened it, and the moment I read the first line, my throat went dry. Melody M. Strong work ethic, too independent, pushes back on direction, lacks culture alignment. Too independent. They had turned my greatest strength into a liability. Pushes back was corporate speak for me, not letting Ethan rewrite my audit findings to cover up his mistakes. Culture alignment was HR speak for not passive enough to be controlled. I scrolled. My name appeared again and again, with snide comments from executives, undocumented complaints, entire threads of backward feedback they had never shared with me, all compiled like a secret autopsy of my career. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was at the bottom, a bullet point from Veronica, dated 2 weeks before promotions were finalized. "Let's keep Melody where she is. Promoting her would upset Ethan's org chart, and she lacks the polish we want in client-facing leadership. Good enough has become our internal shorthand. Ironic, but fitting." I sat in my apartment for an hour just staring at it. The words ironic, but fitting echoed in my head like a smoke alarm in an empty church. I felt humiliated, sure, but deeper than that, I felt engineered. Like they had planted a reputation and waited for it to bloom into self-sabotage. They wanted me to stay quiet, stay small, billable, but forgettable. Instead, I printed the whole document, slid it into a red folder, labeled it Discovery, And then, as if on cue, my attorney called. "Hey, Melody, we got a bite." "A bite?" "Yeah," he chuckled. "One of the trademark license inquiries came from a shell corporation. We traced the IP. Guess who? Ethan. Looks like he tried to secure a retroactive usage license under a fake LLC." I exhaled through my teeth. That slimy jerk. Not only was he scrambling to cover his tracks, he was trying to bury the paper trail behind legal smog. That was corporate instinct at its finest. Never apologize, never explain, just launder the narrative. I stared at the Slack folder again. I thought about deleting it, about leaking it, about stapling it to a baseball bat and bringing it to the next staff meeting. But instead, I wrote a speech. A short one, cold, clinical, worded with legal precision and emotional subtext, like a scalpel. Because next Thursday was the quarterly all hands, and they'd asked me to lead the opening culture share. Funny how they still trusted me with a microphone. They wouldn't after what I planned to say. But that wasn't even the twist. The real twist came the next morning. The red folder was gone, taken from my locked desk drawer. Someone had left a Post-it note in its place. No signature, just 4 words. Good enough doesn't mean quiet. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, replaying every interaction of the last 2 weeks, every smirk, every vague compliment, every "we'll circle back." My brain was a projector, looping corporate gaslighting on a max setting. Whoever left that note knew everything, not just about the trademark, but the file, the Slack DM, my drawer. They had been in my space, and they were watching. The next morning, I walked into the office with that strange, electric calm you feel right before a tornado hits. I passed Ethan by the coffee maker. He avoided eye contact, but I noticed his collar was sweat stuck to his neck. Good. Let him marinate in it. By 9:15, my phone buzzed. A Slack message from Veronica. "Hey, Melody, excited to hear your culture share this morning. Just keep it light and fun, okay?" Light and fun, I thought. Right. At 10 a.m., the company gathered on Zoom. Over 120 video tiles, a mosaic of forced smiles and bored eyes, sipping from company-branded mugs like we were cult members hydrating before a sacrifice. My face filled the screen. I smiled. "Hi, everyone. I'm Melody. Most of you know me as the analytics lead for the Ember integration, or maybe you know me as the one who fixed the server crash in March. But lately, some of you have started calling me something else." I paused just long enough. "Good enough, Melody." A few nervous chuckles. One person muted too late. I clicked share screen. The slideshow began. Slide 1, a screenshot of the internal Slack channel, the emoji of my face, the reactions under my update posts. Slide 2, the footnote from the internal performance review, too independent, culture misalignment. Slide 3, a clean, bold image of the Good Enough Melody trademark certificate. Silence. Not polite silence, the kind where people stop breathing. I let the moment sit. "Here's what's fun about irony," I said, cool as ice water. "If you use it enough, it becomes documentation." I clicked again. Slide 4, a redacted version of the invoice, line items, usage counts. Final amount, $3,128.54. Now, before anyone panics, I'm not suing the company. Yet, I said, this is a business relationship. I've trademarked the phrase that some of you have built a brand around, and I'm offering a licensing option. Fair market value, internal use only. People were frozen. A few cameras went black. A few messages flew across private channels. I could practically smell Ethan sweating through his collar. "And before you think this is just petty revenge from an emotional woman," I continued, my smile widening, "let me show you one more thing. Slide 5, a digital mock-up of mugs, notebooks, hoodies, all with the phrase, 'Good Enough Melody,' in bold Helvetica, underneath my Etsy link. The chat exploded. I closed my slides. Anyway, that's my culture share. Any questions? The Zoom was dead silent until a voice piped up. It was Grace from legal. Actually, yes, Melody. Can you stay on the call for a moment? Everyone else dropped like flies. It was just me, Grace, and the eerie sound of Zoom emptiness. We need to talk, she said flatly. Not here. Conference room B, now. I walked in 5 minutes later to find her, Veronica, and, to my surprise, Brenda from HR. Brenda, who hadn't spoken to me in months except when she thought I was quitting. They didn't even wait for me to sit down. Grace slid a paper across the table. I read the header. Notice of administrative leave pending investigation. Effective immediately. You're being placed on leave, Veronica said, her voice clipped. You violated our communication policies, breached internal confidentiality, and introduced unauthorized financial claims. I stared at her. You're suspending me for using my own trademark? We're suspending you, she said tightly, for making a spectacle. I looked at the paper again, and I smiled, because they hadn't seen my post-it note yet. It was still tucked in my pocket, waiting for the exact moment to be taped to Veronica's office door. You don't own the narrative anymore. They walked me out like I was radioactive. No dramatic box of belongings, no security escort. Just 3 vultures pretending it was standard procedure. Grace from legal tried to soften it. You'll still receive pay pending review, she said, as if hush money came in bi-weekly deposits. Veronica stood beside her like a Botoxed gargoyle, arms folded, daring me to react. I didn't. I just left. Took the elevator down like a queen descending to exile. I walked out past the motivational posters in the lobby. Integrity is doing the right thing, and straight into the parking garage where my beat-up Camry coughed to life like it was in on the joke. I didn't go home. I went to a local print shop. I printed 50 high-gloss flyers with the Good Enough Melody trademark logo, my trademark number, and a cheerful note. Unauthorized usage of this phrase constitutes a billable offense. See terms at https://www.google.com. Search QA-goodenoughmelody.com. Then I mailed one to each department head, overnight delivery. Next stop, the local coffee shop where I sat by the window, opened my laptop, and started digging. If they were going to accuse me of breaching confidentiality, I wanted to see just how confidential their own behavior had been. That's when I found it, buried in the cached files of the company's old Jira board. Bless their outdated security. A link titled Project Chimera Q4 Staffing Contingency. I clicked. The document was dry, cold, corporate voodoo, but it painted a clear picture. They had been restructuring quietly behind the scenes. The plan: move all legacy staff with strong internal influence into non-client-facing roles, to bury them. Me, Olivia from IT, Leo in UX, 3 of the highest-performing team leads, all of us with one thing in common. We had all questioned directives from above. We had all escalated issues. We were too visible. But the final page is what stopped me cold. A spreadsheet of names, and next to each one, a column for risk factor and another for containment strategy. Next to my name, risk factor, high. Containment strategy, internal gossip plus HR. Marginalization, long-term exit via performance review, downgrade, or soft push. I didn't know whether to scream or laugh. They hadn't just mocked me. They had planned it. They had fed the good enough joke like a virus into the bloodstream of the company to build a narrative that would justify my removal. But now, I had it. Proof. And I wasn't alone. I messaged Olivia. Just a subject line. Still think it's a coincidence? Attached the spreadsheet. 10 minutes later, she replied, Holy cow. Did the same thing to me last year. Want in on something bigger? She dropped a Google Drive link and a burner Zoom invite. The folder was titled Project Phoenix. Inside were whistleblower statements, screenshots, emails, even audio recordings, all from former employees, or rather, former victims who had been squeezed out using culture performance flags. It wasn't a company. It was a reputation machine, a factory for sculpting someone's downfall, just enough to make it look like their own fault. And now, we were assembling the wreckage. I joined the Zoom. 5 faces, former employees, all different departments, all with one thing in common. They'd been branded, discredited, and flushed. "Melody," Olivia said, "you didn't just trademark a joke." I raised an eyebrow. "You trademarked their favorite weapon." And that's when it hit me. The phrase had never been about me. It was about anyone who scared them. And now, we were all coming back with receipts. The burner Zoom turned into a war room. Olivia ran point, like she'd been waiting years for this moment, cross-referencing everyone's records, patching timelines together like a forensic quilt. Leo, the IT guy they'd quietly moved to data hygiene, had logs, real ones, system access records showing who edited what when. We matched his timestamps to my internal review file. Guess what? Ethan again. Logged in 48 hours after the review deadline, which meant my official evaluation, the one that labeled me not promotable due to tone, had been doctored after the fact. "I can pull the audit trail," Leo said, sipping his soda like it was fine whiskey. "But if they catch wind, they'll nuke my access and ghost wipe everything." "We don't need access," I replied. "We just need proof that they knew." And we had it in one shared folder. Former UX manager Leo had uploaded a recording from 2 years ago, back when the company still pretended to care about ethics. It was Veronica, mid-call, coaching a manager on how to give constructive exits. Frame it as a culture mismatch. Avoid hard skills, keep it behavioral. If you call someone good enough times, eventually they'll believe it. I rewound that part 3 times. The voice, the cadence, that smirking tone I'd heard in every one-on-one. Eventually they'll believe it. They built their whole org chart on psychological erosion. That night, I made my move. I updated HTTPS www.google.com/search Cuba good enough melody. Com with a full timeline, sanitized and redacted where needed, but packed with dates, documents, and side-by-side comparisons. I didn't name names. I didn't have to. Every single manager involved would recognize their fingerprints. By morning, the site had 2,000 hits, then 5,000. Then it hit Reddit. R as anti-work, r/female workplace, r/legal advice. Some corporate TikTok account with 300K followers turned it into a dramatic reading. I watched it from my couch, wrapped in a blanket, sipping gas station wine. They'd used an AI voiceover and slow piano music, and it somehow made the words hurt worse. By lunch, 3 people I didn't even know had DM'd me with their own stories. One from finance, one from legal, and one who was still employed, who had the keys to the archive. She didn't say her name. She just sent a screenshot of an internal email chain titled Managing Narrative Risks, Melody M. Escalation Strategy. Attached was a PDF. When I opened it, my stomach flipped. Page 1. An org chart, not the company's, but mine. A reputation kill plan with my name in the center, surrounded by bullet points labeled Control Visibility, Redirect Credit, Diffuse Loyalty, and Phase Out Leadership Potential. It wasn't damage control. It was a blueprint for character assassination. That was the last straw. No more clever invoices, no more Etsy mugs. I called Olivia. "It's time." She didn't ask what I meant. She just said, "I've got the media contact lined up and a friend at the labor board who hates HR. We're done playing defense." Next move was checkmate, and it started with a calendar invite. Subject line, Good Enough Melody. A company-wide truth bomb, 9:00 a.m., Monday. Location, Zoom. Host, Melody. M. No password. No cap. No survivors. Monday. 8:59 a.m. I watched the participant count tick upward like a counter in Chernobyl. 30, then 80, then 150. By 9:02, we were at 270. Entire departments, former employees, anonymous avatars, even a few brave souls from legal watching like fire marshals at a gasoline convention. My screen stayed dark. No intro music, no welcome slide. Just a title, Narrative Control and Career Containment, a case study. Then I unmuted. My name is Melody. Most of you know me as Good Enough, but what you probably don't know is that I was never supposed to be here long enough to speak. I clicked to the first slide. Blacked out faces, but the content blazed. A timeline, emails, Slack messages, voice clips. Side-by-side comparison of my original performance review and the altered version. Timestamps, courtesy of Olivia. Screen recordings with file metadata from multiple sources, labeled logged, irrefutable. The chat exploded. WTF? Is this real? I remember this project. She ran that entire campaign. She trained my whole team. How was that average? Slide 2. The strategic reassignment document, containment strategies, color-coded list of targets. Olivia was on this list. Holy, that explains my demotion. I left in 2022 after they killed my role. This is it. Then the kill plan. I read it aloud slowly. Control visibility, redirect credit, diffuse loyalty, phase out leadership potential. I was not good enough, I said, meeting my webcam. I was a threat, not because I underperformed, but because I couldn't be controlled. Somewhere in the sidebar, Veronica's icon appeared, muted, camera off. I smiled. Now, for those still employed, you should know. Retaliating against an employee for lawful speech or labor organizing is a violation of both federal and state employment laws. Which is why every piece of this presentation has already been submitted to the EEO, the Labor Board, and our friends at The Guardian, who were very interested in Project Chimera. More avatars went dark, probably directors logging out to scream into their desk drawers. But I wasn't done. Final slide. A list of resources, legal aid contacts, whistleblower hotlines, a public-facing Google Drive with redacted materials, open source, time-stamped, synced nightly, and a countdown. 3 days, I said. You have until Thursday to retract every defamatory comment, restore every record you falsified, and issue a public apology to every employee you quietly erased. After that, I go nuclear. Including naming names, including the recordings. I leaned closer. Because if I was just good enough, then I shouldn't be able to burn down your entire narrative with one slideshow, should I? I ended the call. Within 10 minutes, HR sent out a vague, company-wide statement, calling it an isolated incident under review. By lunch, someone leaked it to Reddit. By dinner, it was on Twitter. And by midnight, the Good Enough Melody trademark merch store had sold 843 hoodies. None of this was about money anymore. It was about forcing them to say the one thing they weaponized against all of us. We were wrong. The fallout didn't come all at once. It never does. But the cracks started showing by Friday. First, a retraction on the company's internal Slack, a canned apology. It was weak. An attempt to distance themselves from misunderstandings, legal language that didn't actually say anything. But we all knew what it meant. The silence before the storm. Then the storm broke. A memo leaked from HR detailing revised policies for performance evaluation. Turns out the company was retraining all managers on how to give feedback without creating perception issues. Translation? We're removing the word good enough from the corporate lexicon forever. By noon, the company website was down for maintenance. https www.google.com/search q Good. Enough melody. Calm traffic had overwhelmed their servers, and people had begun hitting their corporate portal with questions they couldn't answer. And then the first of the calls came in. Olivia got one from HR, telling her to take a leave of absence for mental health reasons, following her involvement in the whistleblower campaign. She laughed. It wasn't a real leave. It was them trying to shut her down quietly. The rest of us didn't let that happen. Leo hacked into the internal documentation systems and emailed me a fresh batch of spreadsheets, data access logs that showed who accessed which files and when. He'd marked out the IP addresses of those who tried to delete their involvement. By Monday, we had enough to fill a public lawsuit if they pushed us too far. But I wasn't done yet. I spent the weekend compiling an open letter, a final victory lap email that would go out to every single employee in the company, past and present. It detailed everything: the manipulation, the gaslighting, the carefully orchestrated plan to squeeze out anyone who dared to challenge the system. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about everyone they'd ruined along the way. I clicked send Sunday night. It was too late for them to stop it. Monday morning, the legal team sent their first threat. Cease and desist was the subject line. It didn't matter. They couldn't take the truth down. They couldn't erase what we'd built. I opened up a Zoom call for a group of former employees: Olivia, Leo, a few others who had been quietly blacklisted. And we celebrated. Good Enough Melody had officially crossed the line from a joke into an anthem. We made them see us, Olivia said, a little breathless. For the first time, they couldn't ignore us. I smiled, leaning back in my chair. Yeah, and now they'll never forget us. 2 weeks later, the company announced a leadership restructuring and new leadership initiatives. In reality, it was an exodus. The executives who had been responsible for the manipulation were either quietly moved to new roles or let go in a company-wide shakeup. But the story didn't stop there. A former manager from my team reached out. We're organizing. We're taking it public. That's when I realized this wasn't just a win for me. It was a win for everyone who'd ever been overlooked, underestimated, or erased. People from all over the company were stepping forward, sharing their stories, sharing their receipts. And just like that, Good Enough Melody wasn't just a phrase anymore. It was a revolution. The last thing I did was update the site. I took down the invoices, the legal jargon. I replaced it with a quote I'd always believed. No matter how hard they try to bury it, the only thing more dangerous than someone who knows their worth is someone who knows yours. And on that day, I knew they'd never be able to silence me again. Not me, not any of us. Because in the end, no one is good enough. We were all better than that, and we always had been. This story teaches us that true power doesn't always lie in a title or a position, but in your ability to recognize your own value and document your truth. In a world where corporate environments can sometimes use subtle psychological tactics to undermine employees, standing up for yourself can be a difficult and isolating experience. However, when you combine your voice with others who have been similarly affected, your individual story transforms into a powerful movement. The actions of a single person, Melody, sparked a fire that brought a group of people together, giving them the courage to reclaim their narratives and hold the company accountable. The message is clear. Do not let others define your worth. Document your work. Be aware of your environment and never be afraid to speak up, because a collective voice is a force that cannot be silenced.